Welcome back to Bombastic Nation and Ting and Ting and Ting. Back with some more vibe for you, and this one is the second episode of History of England. This one is called Fire and Swords by Extra History Man. I'm gonna leave the link in the description as always for every video that I watch. I'm gonna leave the link in the description. Go check it out. Check out the channel. So the channel some love, because I mean they're dropping some education on us and thing. You know what I mean? And comment in the section below, man. Tell me what you give me a little history and thing about England that I don't know, that you think wasn't mentioned, and all of that good stuff. So, you know, comment down below and thing. I ain't gonna keep all you too long, you know what I mean? Aye, man, gonna watch this. Let's YouTube and simmer.
Extra History of England. Once again, this spectacular tale will be told by David Crowther from the History of England podcast. And after last week's episode, Zoe and I have been debating all week on who's going to win this epic showdown between Edward and Philip.
I'm glad it's piqued your interest. But why didn't you just research the answer yourselves?
Well, Zoe not having opposable thumbs is a bit of a page-turning hindrance for one thing. But more importantly, we'd rather hear you tell us what happens next.
Well, in that case,
Tell us.
Allow me to fill you in. In 1337, Edward led a country of maybe 4 million people against the most powerful country in Christendom, a country 5 times its size. Edward was never to gain a reputation as a stay-at-home kind of lad. He was confident, bullish, aggressive, a warrior. He would bend the world to his will. Edward had a plan. In a letter to the Pope, he wrote, "The best way to avoid the inconveniences of war is to pursue it away from one's own country. It is more sensible for us to fight our notorious enemy in his own realm." Edward would attack. He would follow the strategy of the chevauchée, a French word for raid on horseback. He would impose what he called fire and sword on the French countryside, marching on a wide 20-mile front, a hideous wave of destruction and death, burning and killing everything in their way. His chevauchée would cause enormous economic damage. It would humiliate the opposing Valois King Philip and show Philip's subjects he could not protect them and that they should instead choose Edward as their king. Philip would be forced to come and fight a set battle where Edward was sure he could win, or at least that was the plan. England was small and insignificant, so Edward started by getting himself some big friends, including the Holy Roman Emperor, and the Holy Roman Emperor did not come cheap. But in 1339, Edward could march with his army into France, head held high, banners flying towards glory.
So he's paying for an ally. Is that what I'm the gist of what I'm hearing here? Because he had to get the Holy Roman Pope to get to his side, but he didn't come cheap. Wow. But I guess it's the same thing here, you know. You find like maybe not on a wide, bigger scale, bigger countries, but you find a third world country, you know, the little dictator on the scene, give him some money, you know. Noriega, is it Noriega, the guy from Panama? Yeah, he comes to mind. Give him some money, he get rich, you know what I mean. Several of those little countries in South America too. They have the way where, you know, certain superpowers back them. They live lavish lives. The people suffer. You know what I mean? So they kind of paying for an allegiance. We repeating. I guess it works. So, you know, let's keep going. Let's keep going here and thing.
Could march with his army into France, head held high, banners flying towards glory. In fact, his banners were flying towards humiliation and failure. The Holy Roman Emperor liked his gold very much. He was less enthusiastic about doing anything for it, such as supporting a balmy English loser. So he chilled out at home, spent a quiet night in with his gold instead. Edward's campaign went nowhere. His useless allies had cost a fortune.
That's a chance you take.
By 1340, Edward had a pile of debt so high he could hang glide off it, and he was forced to borrow more and more from Italian banking houses. In Gascony, the war was going badly. Worse, the French took control of the English Channel with a large, well-equipped fleet against which the English could throw up only merchant ships. Edward's councillors, his naval captains and his nobles told him he could not break the French blockade, but Edward was angry and would not listen. He snarled at his council, "I will cross, and you who are frightened where there is no fear, you may stay at home." And so in 1340, the King of England, Edward III, against the advice of all his experts, attacked a navy almost twice his size head-on near the town of Sluys off the coast of Flanders.
Wow.
To the amazement of France and all Christendom, Edward won. 18,000 French sailors lost their lives. But while Sluys was a great victory which gave England back control of the English Channel, success on land still seemed a long way away. The only way Edward could get the money he needed to carry on was by Parliament voting him a special tax. So Edward went to Parliament to ask for the money, but Parliament was tired of the expense of Edward's war and refused. But Edward would not give up. In 2 small battles in Brittany, the English achieved stunning victories against absurd odds. Edward had 2 advantages. The first was aggression and superior leadership. Edward was lucky to gather around him captains of extraordinary ability. Walter Manny, a wildly enthusiastic, aggressive and talented tactical commander who would charge into every battle with incredible courage and the battle cry, "Manny!" on his lips. Henry of Lancaster, a cultured man who would write a book called The Book of Holy Medicines, lamenting his misspent youth of wine, women and song and advocating the religious life, who was also a visionary military strategist and winner of another absurdly unlikely victory.
You know, the Edward of Lancaster, or whatever they said here, I already missed it, but anyway, shouldn't make myself the Giant of Grenada. How does that sound? Just a little levity, but that's my man's winning with small numbers and little odds, you know, of winning. Okay. My man is starting to sound like Admiral E on the scene here.
Victory in the south of France. The Captal de Buch, a Gascon, was the leading cavalry commander of his age. Together, these men around Edward would make history. Was that the English
but there's the difference there. He's surrounding himself with great minds and brave men, great minds of the time or of war or whatever you want to call it. He's surrounding himself with people who he know could benefit him. Smart.
Age. Together, these men around Edward would make history. The second was that the English had taken the rulebook of medieval military tactics, torn it into tiny, tiny little pieces, rewritten the rules, stamped on the tiny pieces of the old rules, ground them into the mud, and danced on them. Every medieval army knew the battles were won by heavily armoured, chivalric aristocratic knights who sat on horseback and who by the sheer weight of their charge irresistibly smashed through any opposition. But Edward made English knights fight on foot. They did not charge. They waited for their enemy to attack them. Archers were set on the flank.
Counter-attacks.
Units of knights. All other European armies used a crossbow because it needed little skill, so anybody could be trained to use it. English and Welsh archers were armed with the deadly longbow. The longbow was a 6-foot bow of yew, massively difficult to draw and requiring a life of training from boyhood to use effectively. Handily, that's exactly what they had, since in all the villages and towns, fathers and sons practiced every week. The longbow had a longer range than the crossbow, hit like a truck, and could penetrate all but the best plate armour. It had a much faster rate of fire than a crossbow. Each longbow could fire a deadly storm of 6 arrows a minute. Edward would teach the French that the most powerful weapon on the battlefield was a lightly armoured, low-born peasant. But Edward's cause looked lost. His debts were so massive that he defaulted, sending 2 Italian banking houses into bankruptcy. England had now been fighting for 8 years and had very little to show for it, and Edward could find no one to lend him money. Worse still, in 1346, King Philip of France gathered a massive army and prepared to drive the English out of France once and for all. So Edward did the only sane and rational thing when broke and massively outnumbered. He spent every last penny he had, raised an army, and invaded. He landed in Normandy with a small army and a plan. He would burn and destroy French countryside as he marched north towards Flanders, pulling Philip behind him. And then he'd join up with the Flemish army and with the combined army turn, fight and destroy the French in battle. But as he marched north, he was in danger of being trapped by the rivers before he could meet the army of Flanders.
Mother Nature.
But Edward found a way over the River Somme. Desperately, the English marched, the French snapping at their heels. Again and again, the fords and bridges were held against them. And then one night, as the French were closing in, they found an Englishman living in France. And he told them of a secret ford, marked by a white stone. It was called Blanche Tac. In the dead of night, the English slipped over the ford and were away. But the next day, disaster. The army of Flanders were not coming. The only reasonable thing to do now was to run for the coast, England, and safety. But Edward didn't like to do the reasonable thing, and so at a place called Crecy, without the Flemish, he turned his army to face the French. It was time to fight. To his son and heir, the 16-year-old Edward, known to history as the Black Prince, he gave command of the left wing. As Philip marched his army towards Crecy, the roads were lined with French shouting, "Kill! Kill!" On the 26th of August, 1346,
Yeah, they didn't have
Philip's
TV
army
back
moved in
then.
The English force. The French were strung out for miles. Philip's best commanders advised caution. Put on those comfy Jim Jams the Queen gave you last Christmas. Don the royal slippers, get a good night's snooze and let everyone catch up. Then drown the English in a river of their own blood after a light breakfast. But Philip looked at the puny English army, now less than 1/3 his size. He looked at the contemptible English peasants and their bows. He heard the cries of kill in his ears, and he ordered the attack. A wave of crossbowmen came forward to soften the English up with thousands of bolts. But before they could get in range, the English bent, drew, fired, and unleashed a storm. The crossbowmen ran or died. Furious, Philip ordered the cream of French chivalry to attack. As they thundered towards the English lines, they brutally cut down any of their own crossbowmen in the way, and the flower of French chivalry started to die. Even where the finest armour protected them, horses were vulnerable, and the chaos and screams of men and horses as the arrows struck home was terrible. Between waves of attacks, English and Welsh archers sprinted into the field, retrieved arrows, and thrust daggers into the exposed eyes or necks of the helpless fallen French knights. But the courage of the French was undeniable. The blind King John of Bohemia ordered 2 of his companions to tie their horses to his and lead him into the fray. All 3 were found at the end still linked together in death. And despite horrible losses, through sheer courage and weight of numbers, many French knights did make it to the English lines. Finally, there they could crush their tormentors. But the tiny contingent of English knights would not break. At one point, the young Black Prince was so hard-pressed that one of his commanders begged Edward to send reinforcements. Edward turned to his Good Parenting Guide, Teaching Self-Reliance section. Tell my son this is his chance to win his spurs. The Black Prince was on his own, and the Black Prince did not break. Eventually, Edward knew it was time to finish this. As the massive French army milled in shock and chaos and pain and confusion, the English knights mounted their horses and levelled their lances, and the French fled. And Europe reeled with shock at the news that the flower of Christendom lay dead in a field of blood, slaughtered by English peasants.
Never underestimate the peasants. Never. That's the lesson to learn there. You know what I mean? All right, man. Thank you all for watching this with me, man. I'm excited to see the rest of this. And like I said, I know it's history. I know it's past and it's already been told or lived. But I'm still interested because it's new to me. I want to learn it all. You understand what I say a day? Link in the description all here. Go down there, extra history. Check it out without me stopping and babbling ever so often. But check them out, give them some love and thing, you know what I mean? In the meantime, y'all take care of each other, alright? Cool runnings.